Okay. Apologies to everyone for the bit of a late start. Thank you so much to everyone for your patience. As you all know, we're joined today by Syamarani Dasi, who will give us some insights as part of our out-of-the-box first annual Progressive Vaishnavism conference on demystifying misconceptions about the position of women in Bhakti. So I am Christy Freer. I'm going to be moderating the panel. I'll talk a little bit about the format, then I'll introduce our speaker, and then we can open things up if that works for everyone. So I'll start by noting that Syamarani Dasi has written a book, The Art of Spiritual Life, among other things that you can check out. She is a master painter of Bhakti art and is one of the most stalwart teachers of Bhakti Yoga in current times. She is among the first disciples of Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the world-renowned founder Acharya of ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And she is also a prominent student of Srila Prabhupada's close associate, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Under both of their expert spiritual guidance, she has created, now it says on a website nearly 300, but I believe it is actually more close to nearly 400 works of devotional art, and is recognized as one of the most influential artists to emerge out of the Hare Krishna movement and its subsequent school of art. So after meeting Srila Prabhupada in Tompkins Square Park in New York City back in 1966, Syamarani Prabhu's life quickly evolved into a vibrant whirlwind of devotional service and sacred art that has expanded over the past 5 decades, just touching the lives of millions of people around the world. She's also a senior editor for Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj's lectures and books with Gaudiya Vedanta Publications, and she continues to produce vivid canvases, which serve as windows into the spiritual world. As a beloved spiritual guide and leader, she's spoken at temples, universities, festivals around the world, and she's regularly invited to speak on television and radio programs in the countries she visits each year. And lucky us, she has agreed to speak to us today, so we get to hear from her and hear her insights. Syamarani Dasi, with that, I'm going to spotlight you so we can focus on you. And what I will do then is turn it over to you to say anything that you would like to say to start us off. Then I'll get the questions going.
Well, thank you, Christy, for that larger-than-life introduction. And as I mentioned in my letter to you, my reply to your mail, you asked how much time do I want to allow for questions? And I replied that if it's mostly questions, then I can know that I'm speaking to the needs of the audience. Like my conception of misconceptions may be different than the audience's. So I really want to hear from you and the questions that the devotees have so that I can address them.
I'm still on mute. Sorry. Wonderful. What we'll do then, for those who are participating, if you'd like to drop any questions in the chat, I prefer if you can send them just to me. That way I can see if folks are asking the same questions and I can sort of filter and make sure those are going up to the top. This is a rare chance that we have to speak with Syamarani Prabhu, and I would love for everyone to get their questions answered. I'll start with a series of things that I can kick us off with and get the conversation going. And I think you hit on just the first place for us to begin this talk, which is, what do you think are some of the misconceptions about the position of women in Bhakti that we commonly see that you think should be demystified?
Well, what I've been hearing for many years, even back in the 60s, of misconceptions would be women are less intelligent, women can't advance in Bhakti as well as men, women should not be given independence, women cannot be gurus. I guess those are some.
Those are some, yes, agreed. Those are the big ones. You went right for the spicy topic with referring to the women can't be gurus. I wondered if we would get there. I guess the follow-on to that is sort of why do you think, like, where do these misconceptions come from, and why do they persist?
That's a very interesting question. Misconceptions come until, according to Srila Prabhupada's translation of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that is a nectar of devotion, until we reach Shanta Ras, or until we come to, Asakti Bhav and then Prem, there'll always be misconceptions, not only about this context, but every context, beginning with, I am this body, and everything in relation to this body is mine. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, all living entities are born into this material world, into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. Why Krishna shall be all in all? I am as good as Krishna. There's already a position of Krishna, but I'm envious of that. So overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. And because of that, we misunderstand so many things. There is so many, what's the word? Not contradictions, discussions of two sides of any issue. Did the jiva fall from Goloka Vrindavan or not? Is our swarup, our perfectional form and nature, inherent or not? There's so many discussions on so many topics because we're conditioned souls. So why does it persist? Well, let's go outside of the Krishna consciousness movement, and we see that this discrimination is also there in the material world. For example, now as Kali Yuga is coming in, previously, wife being so much attached to her husband, she would not be able to tolerate separation from him. So when his body is burning in the crematorium, she would voluntarily walk in. And one case in point of that is Gandhari, the wife of Dhritarashtra. But now as Kali Yuga is progressing, she's pushed into the fire. She's forced to go into the fire. In many countries like Iran, if a woman doesn't cover everything, then she's tortured, they're killed, and it's just all over the place about men's superiority. So men come in with the man's mood. Like, for example, it says in Prabhupada's purport of the Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, in relation to Devahuti and Kapila Dev, Kardama Muni, that a man has broad shoulders because he has broad shoulder mentality. So if the wife goes along with that and expertly knows how to deal in that circumstance, then the household is peaceful. Not that she has to say yes to everything, but she has to be smart enough to make it look like she's saying yes to everything and helping him to come up to higher understandings. So it's all over the world.
Thank you for that. It's almost, well, not almost, it is kind of a daunting message in that sense, in response to the question in terms of where do these misconceptions come from and why do they persist? If it's both, if I'm understanding, it's part of our conditional nature. So it's something we're always going to struggle with, misconceptions of many kinds. And then we have this societal overlay of what is happening in the material world. I guess I'll ask a series of questions on this, but where do we find our hope then? How do we overcome this? Or is it something that, we have to suffer through and accept? I've seen that sort of dialogue among devotees too, sort of what is our place? Do we have to try to relieve the sufferings of others, or should we just focus on our chanting? What should we do? How much of our energy should we devote to sort of righting this societal wrong?
Well, according to our Guru Varga's translations and purports, our duty is to do two things. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Kritiviti Ache Yadi Nagarani Gram, that everyone try to relieve the sufferings of others by giving them Krishna consciousness. And at the same time, not to neglect our own sadhana. In other words, practice what you preach, and you have more potency when you're practicing it. It's very difficult if I'm trying to encourage others to chant 16 rounds, for example, if I'm not. The potency won't be there. Srila Prabhupada gave the example of if a man is potent and if a woman is receptive, then their union will create a child. But if he's not, then it won't. So the preacher's potency depends on his or her purity, but we definitely have those two duties to reach out. That's why Prabhupada insisted. He said, I am whipping them, distribute books, distribute books, distribute books. Or when back in the 70s, I was part of the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust publishing as one of the artists. And Prabhupada would also insist, if you can't keep up with me in publishing, I'm not encouraged to continue writing. So he wanted that so much. And then there was the Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon. Everybody got about 2 hours of sleep on that one for a couple of months because he wanted his books in the world, because just by being in the world, the potency is so amazing that people get purified. So definitely both directions.
I want to drill more into stories about the early movement and things that we can hear from, but I want to focus more on one thing that you said, because it seems like there's a balance, right? There's a sort of self-preservation of our own sadhana, making sure that we are doing what we need to do to ensure that we have that potency. And then there's, preserving the energy to go out and do what we can to alleviate the sufferings of others. But it's not really a concept of balance, right? They're not always going to be equal, or maybe never going to be equal. And that seems to be something from a societal perspective that comes up a lot for women in society, as we have so many expectations foisted upon us. How do we best find that sort of balance, or like lean into the ways that it might change through our lives as we try to make sure we're doing that thing of putting our own oxygen mask on first, so that we can then, help others find their own oxygen masks, right?
Well, what comes to mind immediately is Srila Prabhupada talked about the ISKCON sandwich. It may be ISKCON, it may not be ISKCON, but the sandwich means that during the day I can do anything as long as my morning and evening or my sadhana is solid. And otherwise, I lose my drive. Like when we were doing the 2-month Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon, everything went amok. I would chant, but it was like completely no concentration, only thinking of I have to get so many paintings done, and not sleeping properly. And so the result of that is that after the 2 months, I thought, I don't know why I'm in this Krishna consciousness movement. Am I supposed to be here or not? That's what happens when our sadhana and regulation becomes a mess. And Krishna says in the Gita, one who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pangs by practice of yoga. I'll tell you a funny story, funny but sad. I was doing one painting for my Shiksha Guru, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. It was the cover of his translation of Srila Viswanath Chakrabarti Thakur's Prem Samput. So Krishna's sitting there, and he has one hand resting on the ground, and the other hand he's discussing. So I was supposed to get it done before Kartik was over, because that's when the devotees were supposed to publish the book. So I was painting early in the morning, and then Gayatri time came around. And so I thought, well, this is more important than chanting my Gayatri at the right time. I know Srila Gurudev said, chant it in the nick of time. It must be, when the sun is at a certain place. But this is so important. It's a marathon. And so although I heard Prabhupada and Gurudev over my shoulder, not physically, but I heard the words, you have to chant the Gayatri at the right time. I thought, no, it's my imagination. So I kept painting Krishna's hand, and it was a beautiful hand. But then when I stepped back, I saw that I put the hand in the wrong place. And so I had to do it completely over again. So if I had just chanted my Gayatri, I would have gotten more spiritual benefit, and then I could have done the hand in the right way.
Wow, I love that idea of the ISKCON sandwich, and so much of what you said resonates with me. I don't know about any other folks here, and we can make this a little bit more interactive if you want to give thumbs up if we're asking questions to everyone else. The idea that if our focus is off, then all of our endeavors, will be tainted by that lack of focus on our sadhana or our spiritual practices. I wonder if we can go back to a couple of different things that you said in terms of seeking out a balance and making sure that we are both putting on our own oxygen mask and then, doing the same thing for others, particularly with respect to, righting this wrong, focusing on this topic of misconceptions of the positions of women in bhakti. I see a lot of swirl or churn in the movement lately with a lot of speculation around, well, what can we as individuals do? What should our leaders be doing, really, is where we should go. What can we do? But I wonder if you have any thoughts that you can share with us on that in terms of if this is something that, if this topic is important to us or something that we're passionate about, maybe twofold, both in terms of trying to not let things bother us and take us off course, and what can we do to actually make progress, both as individuals and as a collective society?
You mean how to right the wrongs of misconceptions?
Yes.
All right. So one thing is, I may not be suffering from the misconceptions because if I'm very strong in my having good association and my Krishna consciousness is there, then I'll be following the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj. He was thrown off a cliff. He was put in a pot of oil into a fire, but Prabhupada said he was blissful. He remembered Krishna. He was blissful. He came out successful. He was never disturbed. Why? Because he was fully surrendered to Krishna and believed that Rakshasasiti, that Krishna is our only protector and our only maintainer. And that's one of the big illusions that make us suffer, is when we think that someone else is my maintainer and protector. And then I'm always frustrated because, as it's stated in the Bhagavatam, first canto, everybody is fallible soldiers. So if I depend on the fallible soldiers in the fight against Maya, then I'll always be frustrated and disturbed. So number one, surrendering to Krishna. Look at Draupadi. She was attempted to be disrobed in the, as it's stated in the Sanskrit, Asat Sabhaya, in the assembly of crude and rude men. And so first she was hanging on to her clothes and even in her mouth, and then she was hanging on and calling out to Krishna to save her. And my Shiksha Guru Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj said that when she was like halfway, Krishna was running around in his palace room. And then his queen said, why are you running around the room? And he said, because my Saki Draupadi is calling me. So then they said, so why don't you go? He said, because she's not fully surrendered. She's trying to protect herself. And then when she put up both arms and said, oh, Govinda, if you like, you can save my honor. Then Krishna ran out without his shoes even, appeared in the palace of Hastinapur, and became, not only supplied, but he became himself her unlimited cloth. I don't remember why I said that. Yeah, so if we're fine, if I'm suffering, then I might be resentful, angry, but if I'm not there, and I'm not there, then if anybody has that question for me, then I'm happy to reply it from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So those, just like with any subject of bhakti, the ninth offense in chanting is not to preach the glories of the Lord to the faithless. So let's see, in 2005, there was a discussion, because as you said, history repeats itself. So in 2005, that was very much brought up. Am I okay here, or do I have to do something? I'm just
No,
saying.
I can still hear you. You're fine.
Okay. That was brought up also, that people were becoming doubtful of Srila Prabhupada because it looked like he was against women and for men. So then, if you can see this, so I created this document called Defending Srila Prabhupada's Integrity, which is about, I think, 13 pages of quotes from his books and lectures, showing that he wasn't like that. So it was published, many people saw it, still the question came up, it was published again, it was spoken of. So those who are ready to understand Srila Prabhupada and the scriptures the way we would love them to, they'll get it, and other people won't. And then, but those who especially, this is Purushottam Mas, so no one's allowed to get angry, no one's allowed to be unforgiving, no one's allowed to criticize others. And in fact, that's not even an order for just Purushottam Mas, but it's an order for all year round. That is, if we criticize others, then what happens is the qualities that I'm criticizing, whether they're there or not in the other person, but I'm absorbing myself in the qualities, those qualities come from me, come to me and in me. If I'm, this is a simple example, if I'm very angry, is I wish that guy would die. So my negative moods are killing my own sons, my own cells, because they're living inside of my body. So the duty of Guru, the duty of all of our acharyas in the disciplic succession, and our duty to them is just to educate, but without attachment, without frustration, without discouragement, just to educate wherever is needed. So like some of the subsections in this collected quotes document is that woman might mean man, may mean man. For example, there's many quotes saying that be careful not to be deviated by a woman. So then we see many quotes by Srila Prabhupada and our other acharyas that woman also means man, because woman is Stri, which is the object of enjoyment. But for women, men is the object of enjoyment. So there's several quotes here by Srila Prabhupada saying that when the scriptures say woman, it also means man for woman. And then another set of quotes here is the spiritual equality of men and women. And another one is true devotee women are the most intelligent. So who are they? Because we're not these bodies anyway, but of all souls, who are the most intelligent? The most intelligent are the gopis. And all of our Gaudiya Guru Varga, Srila Viswanath Chakrabarti Thakur, Srila Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, they all, number one, they all pray in their prajanas to become gopis. Not only that, they already are gopis. They're young teenage girls, and they're coming in the form of men in order to bring us to that highest pinnacle of devotion that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. And so many great personalities like Uddhav, like Narada, they all glorify the gopis. Then there's another section where Srila Prabhupada is encouraging his daughters to become spiritual masters in their own homes and wherever they're needed to be. When I was younger, I was about, let's say, 20 or so at the time. It was 21. It was 1967. And we all took turns giving classes whenever Prabhupada wasn't there in the temple or when he was in another city. And so that's when it started. The boys started complaining to Srila Prabhupada that I was giving classes. And so Prabhupada wrote back, quoting Kiva Vipra Kiva Nyasi, Suja Kananai, Jai Krishna Tattvaveta, Say Guru Hai. Anyone, whether he's a Brahmin, a Kshatriya, born in this family or that family, a Sudra, if he knows the science of Krishna 100%, then he's a teacher and a guru. Of course, I didn't then, and I don't now know the science of Krishna 100%, because then I would be on the level of Srila Prabhupada. Because that is beyond interpretation, beyond misunderstanding, and that's on the level of praying, or at least Bhava Bhakti. So Prabhupada would, and then in 1975, the same thing happened. The sannyasis were trying to stop me from giving classes too. And so Prabhupada wrote to them that the position of a sannyasi is material, the position of a preacher is spiritual. So he always protected that aspect. So, and Prabhupada here is encouraging that if the husband isn't as advanced, or the family would need the help, the spiritual help of the wife. Then there's another section about how are women less intelligent than men, because those statements certainly are there. So if we go deeper into the matter, we see that women are not as intelligent men in exploiting. Like Prabhupada said, machine, he is very expert. He'll take $3,000 and others will be unemployed. This is going on. And they are thinking advancement of civilization. Advancement of civilization means exploit others and you become happy. Others may die for such out of starvation, and one man takes all the money and spends it for wine and women and motor car. That's all. This is advancement of civilization. So women are less intelligent in doing that, although we're getting trained now how to do that very well. Another is at Kali Yuga. There's so many fantastic quotes by Srila Prabhupada. Kali Yuga, Brahmanas and sannyasis, they are less intelligent. Scientists, there's so many quotes from him. Scientists are less intelligent. The teachers in Kali Yuga are less intelligent. And everyone, Kalo, Sudra, Sambhava, everyone in this age of Kali is born Sudra. And everyone can be changed to be a Brahmana by proper initiation. Another quote Indian university students are less intelligent animals. Svavid varahos trikarai, samstu tak rishat vishu. Men who have no devotion to Krishna, Gadagaja, who holds the flute, he is no better than a ass or a cow, Svavid varahos, or a camel. Why a camel? Because a camel likes to stretch his neck and get to the thorny twigs on the tree. And then when he bites, and the thorns bite his tongue, and then his tongue bleeds. So he's tasting his own blood and then thinking that's very sweet. So Srila Prabhupada said, similarly, every drop of semina is worth 60 drops of blood. So lusty men, they're losing their life. Now, I remember there's this one quote from 4th canto, 26th chapter, maybe 26th verse, where it says that women like to be attacked or raped by men because they're too lusty. So that's very interesting, because does that mean that the man who's raping her is not lusty? And if we go to the next sentence in that same paragraph, it says that both men and women want to enjoy each other, desire each other. This is the basic principle of materialistic men. So this, of course, applies to gross materialistic women and gross materialistic men. It doesn't apply to Arundhati, to Anasuya, to Hemlata Thakurani, to Gangamata Goswamini, to Kunti Devi. And then there is the smarta regulation of what a woman can and can't do in terms of diksha, worshiping Shalagram Shila, or worshiping the deity. And this has been a much discussed topic as well. And so we find so many quotes from Srila Prabhupada where he denounces the smarta interpretation of the scriptures. So when I was writing my memoir, The Art of Spiritual Life, so then it came to when I got initiated. So Prabhupada was doing the second Western initiations. That is, the first one was in India, then the second one was in New York. I think the third one was in Boston, and that's where I was. So me and Govinda Dasi and Annapurna, we were the only women there who were already initiated. And so the first night, Srila Prabhupada only initiated the men, gave them the thread and all that. And then the next night, he initiated second initiation, just the women. And he explained, because my assistant Vasanti recently showed me one challenge to prove that women can't be Diksha gurus, because it's stated in the Hari Bhakti Vilas that to be born in a Brahmin family is inconsequential, but one who gets properly initiated under the guidance of a bona fide guru, he can be an actual Brahmin and worship the deity and properly worship the holy name. And so there it also says that initiated and with a sacred thread. So this person says, so because women don't get sacred threads, that proves that they can't be Diksha gurus or properly worship the deities or properly worship the holy name. So there are so many things in all of our Acharya's books that appear to be contradictory with other things that they write in their books. But it's all can be reconciled very easily. So that statement is there, quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but at the same time, there's other quotes that are not contradictory, but are expanded explanations, we'll say. Like, for example, the following injunction, this is from Prabhupada's books. The following injunction is given in the Hari Bhakti Vilas 194 regarding mantra adhikar, or the qualification for chanting the Diksha mantras. And then he quotes some Sanskrit, and then he gives the translation. Sudras and women who are chaste and sincerely interested in understanding the absolute truth are qualified to be initiated with the Pancharachati mantras, meaning the Diksha mantras. And then, quoting Bhagavad Gita, that, that very famous verse, Mam hi partha vipashrita JP Papajonaya, Striyo Vaishak Vita Udras, Tepi Janti Padam Vitim. And that is, O Partha, anyone who takes shelter of me, whether he's a lower birth or women or Sudras, mercantile men, by taking shelter of me, he can reach the supreme destination. The supreme destination means you've got to be perfectly worshiping the holy name in order to achieve the supreme destination. So like in that 1967 initiations, one, he was going to be Professor O'Connell, and he was there at the men's initiation or the women's, I forget. And he said, can women also be gurus? So Prabhupada said, he quoted this verse from the Gita, and he said, well, if they can reach the supreme destination, then why can't they be gurus? If they can be professors, why can't they be gurus if they can reach the supreme destination? And then he said, but it is very rare. Like you have your Gangamata Goswamini, your Hemlata Thakurani, what to speak your Janava, the consort of Nityananda. But then he said, but then both for men and women, it's rare to be on that perfect platform. And that perfect platform is the platform of perfect guru. But I just keep rambling on, and I'm not giving you the opportunity to ask any more questions. So I'll be quiet there, Christy, and see if you have anything.
Oh no, I love hearing this, and I'm sure that all of our audience does love hearing this as well. I'm so glad you walked through all the points in that document and just the points in your experience. There's so many that are worth recapping for folks who have joined us a little bit lately. We talked about some things that I had never heard from you say. I mean, we've heard quotes being taken out of context. We've heard quotes being given in, that now we have the full context when we really dig in and we go back to the source material for quotes of Srila Prabhupada, or quotes that are applied too broadly in a materialistic context when that, was not the intent. We don't often hear, for example, sort of what he said after but it's not so rare. We don't hear the line of, oh, but it's for women and men, it's rare. So there's something to be said for, I think how we have this human tendency to this fallacy of sort of picking and choosing things that reinforce our own sort of preconceived conditional notions. Like I had never heard before the idea that there might be something sort of lost in translation of scripture, that when it says man, sometimes it also can mean women, or taking the concept of intelligence on its head to mean something negative in a materialistic context rather than something positive. So these are really, really interesting insights that I think sometimes get lost in the conversation, where the same sound bites are repeated over and over again by folks who are trying to use them to justify a sort of agenda.
And I'm glad you brought up about, Christy, about things that are taken to be negative, but that are actually positive. And one of them is that women should not be given independence. So Prabhupada explains very beautifully that no independence doesn't mean no independence to act. It just means no independence to be outside of the protection of, in her young age, her father, then her husband, then her grown-up sons. Of course, everything is so hodgepodge now in as Kali Yuga progresses. But he said that's why we have certain injunctions for ladies. Do this, don't do that, so that you won't be exploited by unscrupulous men, because women are the weaker. Like Prabhupada said, if a woman policeman is there and some big husky guy comes, he could just knock her over. So not being given independence means that and he says it, that she won't be able to maintain the independence because she'll be exploited, as we see all over the place. And now women are trained to be men and trained to be exploiters too.
Right. Even that sense of equality in what?
Yeah, in what?
Really. I wanted to go back to something else you said as well, in terms of like the qualities that we criticize come back to us, and in our efforts to sort of relieve the suffering of others or bring our own potency to our preaching, to bringing Krishna consciousness to others, it seemed as if you were saying like we have to accept the law of diminishing returns at some point and figure out sort of where is that point where we have to stop expending that energy and go back and reinforce that energy into our own spiritual practices, that we have to go through and educate without attachment, that when we cross that line into being attached to the fruits of our labors, that's where we start expending unnecessary or fruitless energy, really, that would be better devoted to preserving our own sadhana. Is that a fair understanding?
Sure. What I'm getting is if we waste time criticizing, actually our bhakti goes in the garbage can. We get the qualities of the person that we're criticizing, and it's taken us so long to come to this human form of life, and the human form of life is so rare, and bhakti connection is so rare, and I think, oh my God, I could have spent all that time in developing my bhakti.
Right, we have no time to waste, right? I'll turn now to some folks who were in the meeting, and I'll try to see if I can unmute. There was one who wanted to ask a question live, and this was Vijay Krishna Prabhu, who said, the paintings of Syamarani Dasi did make me a devotee, Hare Krishna. So I will, let's see, ask if I can unmute and turn it over to you, Prabhu, to ask your question.
Yes, Mother Christie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you. We can hear you.
And Syamarani Mataji, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to your most charitable and merciful association. If I may, my question is related to the following. Your personal exchanges with Srila Prabhupada and Narayan Maharaj on the following topics. 1, women living in the temples as brahmacharinis. 2, women chanting in public. 3, women writing books on Krishna consciousness. 4, the difference between health issues in women, in female devotees and male devotees. 5, cooking bhoga for the deities. 6, giving classes in public. 7, how to dress in public. And marriage. And if you do not have, I'm not sure how you will answer this question, but among all the 8 items, I would like for you, if I may ask, to focus on the following. Is it that if a female devotee doesn't get married, the chances for her to become a pure devotee will become diminished. So that is my question, if I may.
What's your name, Prabhu?
My name is Vijaya Krishna Das. I'm disciple of Narayan Maharaj and the temple president of International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society in the Azores archipelago, the Portuguese Azores archipelago. I sent you our calendar by email.
I remember you.
Yes, 2018, and you answered by email with capital words, beautiful.
Mhm. Yes. So your question is, if a lady is not married, then what?
Is it that her chances to become a pure devotee will become diminished?
I'm glad that you mentioned the word marriage, because there's something that I was going to say before and then didn't regarding the sacred thread. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a moment for that and then answer your question as best I can. So,
of course.
So this person is quoting that if you don't have a sacred thread, then you can't worship the holy name, you can't worship the deities, even though we have quotes to the contrary. But anyway, so Srila Prabhupada was encouraging us three, me, Govinda Dasi, and Annapurna, to get married. He said, don't become implicated. And this is one of the lectures, one of the thousands of lectures that is in the folio, so anyone can find it. Don't be implicated, don't be disturbed, get yourself married. So he said, the reason that the men get the sacred thread and the women don't is because in the Vedic culture, all women are married. And of course, now that Kali Yuga is here, Prabhupada himself personally told us the word brahmacharini, and he started the brahmacharini ashram. But anyway, so according to Vedic culture, all women are married. So he said the woman is supposed to follow her husband. So if her husband is a brahmana, then she automatically becomes a brahmana without any separate endeavor, because she's following. And if she marries a non-brahmana, then what is the use of her becoming a brahmana? Like even Draupadi, not Draupadi, Gandhari, she didn't want to appear superior to her husband, who was blind by birth, Dhritarashtra, so she blindfolded herself. But then because of her chastity, her eyes became so powerful that she was able to make her son Duryodhana as hard as steel. I think many of you know that history. So anyway, the wife is supposed to be chaste to the husband. And so for that reason, she doesn't get the sacred thread, but it doesn't mean that she's not as qualified within her own Krishna consciousness. I'll just read one thing in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, quoting from the Skanda Purana. Srila Sanatana Goswami says, then there's Sanskrit. So in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the above verses, it's stated that upon receiving Diksha, in accordance with the regulations of Shastra, everyone, whether they be a Brahmin, Vaishya, Kshatriya, woman, or Sudra, becomes qualified to worship Bhagavan in the form of Shalagram Shila. The word Sat Sudra means a Sudra who has received Diksha. After receiving Diksha, a Sudra no longer remains a Sudra. So in the scripture, statements are sometimes seen forbidding women and Sudras from worshiping the Shalagram Shilas. But these statements don't apply to those who've taken Diksha, and also they're from the Smarta Brahmins. Now I'm going to come to your question. Let's take some examples. Let's take Gangamata Goswamini. She was a princess. Her name was Sati. And when she became of marriageable age, her father, the king of Putya, he wanted to get her married. But she said, I'm already married to Krishna. There's no need to marry anybody else. And she was so insistent on going to Vrindavan to meet her husband that her father allowed her to go. So when she's in Vrindavan, she discovers one great follower of Srila Rupa Goswami named Haridas, and she took initiation from him. And he said, I can give you initiation, but I can't take care of you. You'll have to beg. and you can live with my elderly disciple woman. And so she was begging chapatis, little pieces of chapati, and then she wanted to get her married. Huh? What? She didn't get married. Her father allowed her to go to Vrindavan, and then she studied the scripture, and she lived with this other woman and she was chanting a lakh of rounds, 64 what is it, 64 rounds a day minimum. And then when the other lady died, her guru said, okay, now I want you to go to Jagannath Puri and preach, and I want you to establish a temple, resurrect the discarded temple of Lord Chaitanya speaking to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So she went to Jagannath Puri. She was about 50 now, and she began to preach from Ras Panchajai all over. But when she was preaching, speaking Ras Panchajai, that is the 5 chapters in relation to Krishna and the gopis in the 10th canto, everybody used to come to her, all cultured people. She would cry, they would cry, and she was so glorified. And then one day, it was the day of the appearance of the Ganges, and everyone was going to bathe in the Ganges, which was far away from where she was. So she felt bad that she couldn't go because this deity appeared to her in a very amazing way, Syamarani. So she had to take care of him, so she couldn't go. So what happened was the Ganges really came to her doorstep and took her into the Ganges, and the current of the Ganges brought her to the Jagannath Puri temple and went right through the doors and put her right in front of Lord Jagannath. So then the next morning, the pujaris opened the door and found her there, and said, oh, so you're a great preacher, but I see you're also a thief. You probably came in here somehow or other to steal Lord Jagannath's jewelry. So then they threw her in prison, and then Lord Jagannath himself gave a message, a dream to the king, that is, she's my potency. If you don't take her out of there in royal style with a whole chariot, I'll destroy your whole dynasty. So the king came, apologized. The king became her disciple. All of his ministers became her disciples. He said, what service can I do? And she said, well, you could help me build this temple that my guru ordered me to resurrect from the neglect. And so he did that. So she became a very, very famous Vaishnavi, and worshipped throughout the world. So that's an example of a girl who never got married. So it depends on the quality of the girl. You could have a girl who's not married and who has illicit sex all over the place, and she's going to have a very hard time to become a devotee. And if you have a very strict girl and she's under proper guidance of a proper guru and good association, then she can have a very easy time in bhakti. So it's not the body, it's not the ashram, it's the quality of sincerity. I remember when I was a new devotee, I won't mention names, but one sannyasi was going around saying that women are less intelligent. And so I felt so terrible. I'll never be able to advance like all these brahmacharis here. And so Govinda Dasi at that time, my god sister, I think you all know her, she was Prabhupada's servant along with her husband Gursinda. So she would always go in and out of Prabhupada's room. And that day, me and another devotee were visiting him in New Jersey. So I asked her to tell Prabhupada that I felt really bad that I can't advance as good as the young men, because I'm a woman. So then Prabhupada replied, yes, if you think you're a woman, how can you make any advancement? Very interesting reply. So many great personalities with lower births, like Vyasadeva, he was born of a Sudra mother. Narada, born of a Sudra mother. Some sages born out of the semina was put in a bottle and then they came out of the bottle. a Prahlad Maharaj born as the son of a demon, but because of their own qualities, they surpassed the limitations of that birth. So it depends. Srila Prabhupada also, in that lecture in my initiation ceremony, he said, if you can maintain good Krishna consciousness, then there's no need to be married. But if you're lusty and you need to control the sense gratification, then get yourself married. Don't be implicated. Does that answer the question?
Yes, Mother Syamarani, as to be expected, very helpful, outstanding, if I may say, just brilliant answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhupada's answer.
Thank you so much for that question. I think it also was helpful to demonstrate one of the themes that I think has come throughout this, and it's the sort of danger in over applying or misapplying, right? The knowledge that we think we have, or applying things too broadly. That it seems that as we've seen from some of other Srila Prabhupada's letters and the like, that he gave different advice to different folks in different circumstances at different times. So we can't assume that any one statement should be applied across the board to any group of people, really, what to speak of women in general. Sorry, go ahead.
In that regard, Christy, my mind just shot back to Vijay Krishna Prabhu's question about women chanting in public. And that reminded me of 1972 or 3 in New York City. And the men and women were both chanting in a very big temple room in Brooklyn. And so some of the men leaders got the idea that women shouldn't be allowed in the temple room because it agitates some of the brahmacharis. So my god sister Ekyani wrote to Prabhupada, and I was so dumb, like I wanted to please the leaders, so I would stand up on the top of the first floor stairway to make sure that none of the ladies, I did many dumb things in my life, didn't go into the temple room. So anyway, so one of my god sisters, Ekyani, she wrote to Prabhupada and said, this is what's going on. Is this right or what? And so Prabhupada wrote back that if the men are so agitated, then let them go to the forest. When they go out for preaching, they'll be meeting so many women. So if they can't tolerate that, then let them go to the forest. And then he said, all of our big acharyas, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, all our big acharyas would never have approved that statement.
Interesting.
A lot of these stories are in my memoir, Art of Spiritual Life, because, as I in my life came to these situations, so I wrote about it and quoted.
We all really appreciate you sharing your experiences. We had one other question from the group, from Syamarani Dasi, who asks, how did you emotionally cope with giving class, knowing that the devotees in your temple were complaining, yet you still continue to give class because Srila Prabhupada supported you? How were you brave enough? Where did you find that strength?
Well, like you said, our duty is to our spiritual master. And so, because Prabhupada wanted it, so it wasn't difficult, especially because he replied to the devotees who complained. That gave me more strength, not less strength.
Interesting. Okay, wonderful. Going back to some of the stories of the early days of the movement.
One thing is that in 1976, that was another time that the men would walk out of the class and go into a huddle. And first I was upset, and then the women could only give class in the Brahmachari ashram. So then I started meditating at that time, like what could be the reason? And then what came to me is that's my own false ego, that I must have been saying things in class that disturbed the men, and I was, and that is because I was one of the very biggest book distributors in the world at that time, and in Los Angeles, which was practically the biggest book distribution temple at that time. And so I was preaching some nonsense that if you're not a book distributor, then you're in Maya. And if you're the biggest book distributor, then you're the most advanced. The more books you distribute, the more advanced you are. And that was also prevalent among book distributors like that. And that was also misunderstanding. So I apologize. But anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I want to hear more from you, and I want to hear more about the early days of the movement. I think, we've seen from a lot of the female senior Srila Prabhupada disciples stories from Rukmini Mata, from Vishaka Dasi about, subtly the sort of gender dynamics of the day and what went sort of right, what went wrong, what went off the rails, and struggles of the senior devotees at the time in female bodies, even though it is one of the most basic tenets of our philosophy that we are not these bodies. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience at the time and sort of how that went for you and how you saw that going for other devotees, and maybe how it compares to how you see things going now?
It's a little bit difficult for me to say how things are going now, because I'm not in any of the ISKCON temples, so I don't feel those dynamics. But just because it's the nature of in fact, our Srila Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj said, acknowledging that this is a male-run world and that the spiritual world is a female-run world. Even Krishna himself is subordinate to Srimati Radhika and the gopis. Mother Yasoda is superior to Nanda Baba in her love for Krishna and her thus getting honor from the world of devotees. Because this material world is a perverted reflection. So at the time when I was more, I'm still on the bodily platform, but when I was more on the bodily platform and I took things like that personally, then I was disturbed. And you get disgruntled and angry, but it doesn't disturb me at all now. I just feel sorry for anyone who's affected by it, and I feel sorry for anyone who's affecting it. I feel sorry for anyone who's affecting it because, like, if you take a look at one of the paintings in the Bhagavad Gita, you see this man with an axe, and he has a cow's head, and he's just ready to chop the cow's head, and the cow has the head of a man. So we have to get karma. If we make another group suffer, then I have to become a member of that group in my next life or later in this life. Like, for example, when Narada came to Magrari the hunter, he threw some water on him and Magrari could see so many of his next lives when all the animals that he half killed and tortured, they all came back to destroy him as well, and then he became afraid. So here's another one with Narada and Nalakuvera and Manigriva, that they were acting like trees, being naked with the women. And so Narada said, why just act like a tree? Here, be a tree. And it was because of their connection with their father Kuvera and Narada's friendship with Kuvera, that he gave them mercy when they begged for mercy. No, please don't do this. When they felt themselves becoming stiff. No, I have to do this, but because of my mercy, I'm going to give you the body of trees in Nanda Bhavan, in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj, and then you'll be liberated. Yeah, so we have to get back what we do, and that's a very big consideration of when I'm criticizing others. I may want to stop and think what's going to happen to me as a result of the criticism. You've heard the statement, pointing one finger at someone else and three at you. So that has two meanings. One is I criticize what's actually in me, and I'm not seeing that it's in me, and I look for it in others. And secondly, that will become me as a boomerang. Or if you touch electricity, an electric wire, then it comes back and you get electrocuted. So as you sow, so shall you reap.
Right, right. And it's a good reminder, and tying in the concept of karma here, that going back to the expenditure of energy and how we direct our time and attention and focus and not getting disturbed, that we also don't need to sort of worry ourselves about being the agents of others' karma, that,
And also, interestingly, is I'm not even going to criticize those who criticize, because in the Prophet so kind, he had us read all of his manuscripts to pick out pictures. I don't know if I ever would have read as much, but I had to read everything. So in the 17th, I believe it is, chapter of the first canto, the story of Cricket Maharaj and the cow and the bull was standing only on one leg. Austerity, cleanliness, mercifulness, truthfulness. He was only standing on truthfulness, and that was also tottering, as the different good qualities diminish in the age of Kali. So Cricket Maharaj asked the bull, "Who did this to you?" And the bull said, "Well, there are so many philosophies going around, but I do know that Krishna is the cause of all causes, and nothing can happen without the will of the Lord." And so Maharaj Brigat was very happy with the bull's reply. And he said, "Oh, now I see that you, who are in the form of a bull, you're actually religion yourself, because you know the law of nature, which is that," I want to get the exact words because it's so beautifully stated in the Bhagavatam. I have it here in this book. This is a book of excerpts of lectures from Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj that my friends and I compiled, all about what happens if you criticize and what happens if you mistakenly get affected by the criticism. So anyway, here's a quote. King Cricket said, "Oh, you who are on the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion." So we don't even want to waste our time criticizing the criticizer. I can spend my time criticizing myself and see where I'm absent in my bhakti, and then do what I need to do to become more serious.
There you go. There you go. Good extension of that. Yeah. I'll remind the folks who are listening and watching that we're at 4:15. We have another 15 minutes slotted. If any of you do have any questions and you're in the Zoom meeting, please do send me a chat. I'll ask those questions, or you can ask me if you'd like to ask those questions yourself. I'll keep going in the meantime. There was one thing I wanted to specifically ask in light of, we talked about sort of how things started versus how they're going. I've heard on videos you speak about how your talent was identified early on, that Srila Prabhupada specifically asked, what is your talent? And that we often do that when folks come into the movement to try to engage us in service as, best appealing to our talents, appealing to our strengths, and using those in service. What I have seen come up and questions that we've seen in the group around this are folks tend to get burned out, that we sort of over-index on sort of pulling folks in who are talented, really trying hard to utilize those talents. And I don't know if it's a feature of just the busyness of our lives, but what advice would you give to people who really have a talent that they're passionate about, that they want to devote in Krishna service, about how to avoid getting into that burnout stage?
Well, Christy, I would say let's go back to what you said at the very beginning about balance. Balance, sadhana, hearing from advanced devotees, that Harikatha is purifying. If I don't have it live, then there's so much on the internet these days, and having a regulated schedule, morning program. Like we're late on our Mangalarti here, but we have Mangalarti every morning. Then we have Tulsi worship. And then we sing Astakams, then we learn a verse together, then we chant japa for an hour together. And it gives us so much strength for the day to withstand Maya's consistent calling to us. Balance is the way, and being an association of devotees who understand that balance and will help me in my balance. Sure, I've chanted my prescribed number of rounds. For some it's 16, for some it may be less, for some it's 64. Prabhupada said, if you don't chant 16 rounds, you're an animal. It's a heavy statement.
So don't forget your daily sandwich, right?
Okay.
Right. Thank you for that.
One devotee told me, because she was having trouble doing her services, she said, I just get so overwhelmed during the day that I just can't get things done. So I said, I promise you that if you chant 16 rounds a day, you won't be overwhelmed. And then she started chanting 16.
And sometimes we do see, I think when we have more to prioritize, we spend less idle time and are forced to prioritize and sort of assign our energy accordingly. So that's a helpful sort of real life tool that goes back to what you said about balance. We have another question from Yamuna Devi Dasi. She says, now that you are an initiating guru, has that service changed your life in any way?
Well, first of all, I don't consider myself as guru. My Guru Dev is guru, my Srila Prabhupada is guru, and I just want to be Guru Sevak. And so even Syamarani Dasi Maharaj himself, who I consider like topmost, Manjari, living in the secluded groves, he himself said, I'm taking all of your, it was on his Vyasa Puja day, he said, I'm taking all your love and honor, and I'm offering at the lotus feet of my Gurudev, so that he can offer that, make the lotus flower of your heart blossom to a full blossom and become offerable to Radha and Krishna. And then what to speak of me, who's a formal conditioned soul. I'm just turning everything over. But it makes me more serious, like if a lady has a baby, hopefully she gets more serious because she has to be an example. So it's helping me in that way.
That's lovely.
And it also helps me because, like, if I'm in Maya and I'm thinking of Maya things, then I'm thinking, what kind of a transparent Vaya media am I right now? That's going to go down to the people who depend on me spiritually, and then they're not going to get the power. But I also take a lot of solace in the fact that, and I've seen it, I see it practically, that sometimes disciples say, yes, by your mercy, this happened and that's happened, and I feel so happy and relieved, and I got that done and that got accomplished. And I totally know that it wasn't me, but that Prabhupada and Gurudev were just giving me the credit. And so I'm seeing that even without my bhakti, they're doing fine, despite the mercy of our Guru Varga.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll ask one more question. We'll see if we get any more from the group. Is when we think about this topic in particular, misconceptions about the position of women in Bhakti, we've talked a lot about certain themes, and I think that our audience here is largely a devotee audience and may have had sort of different levels of experience, within the movement, either within the institution or within the institution of ISKCON or other places, other mats, other sanghas. What would you advise to those of us who are maybe in a position of speaking to folks who are looking at ISKCON or at Gaudiya Vaishnavism more broadly from the outside in, or who are new to temples, new to different sanghas, neophyte devotees, who have these questions about how women are conceived of and treated in bhakti, and who we can see either getting disturbed by this or sort of going down that path. It's one thing to think about sort of what can we do for ourselves to avoid falling into that trap? And you've shared a lot on that, but how can we best help others when the idea of do your service with devotion, just do your chanting, don't let it disturb you, is either something that's not going to be appealing to them or maybe not realizable at that point in time? How do we help?
Well, one thing, Christy, is that I would recommend anyone to find an association that's not like that. Because we're not really as stuck as sometimes we think we are. Like, this hashtag Me Too, the battered women, just leave. In here, in this document that I was referring to, Srila Prabhupada writes that if the husband is not favorable and against our bhakti, then the woman has every right to leave. Although there are other quotes where, just be chaste no matter what. But here there's also, like the, I think it was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's daughter. She had a husband who was quite critical of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so, I forget his name. So there, Prabhupada writes that it's fine to leave the husband. And her parents were also saying that he's no good, leave him. There are circumstances, like Prabhupada said, his sister, Pishrima, she stayed with her debauchee husband, and every time he would go out with other women and somebody came, she would say, oh, he has just gone out, he'll be right back. She would never accuse him or criticize him to others. And Prabhupada said later on he became the faithful servant of his wife. So my point here is that we don't need to be battered by the association that we're in. If I'm serious about getting out of it, then I can also look for good association, which is available all over the world, where I am cherished and loved and giving the proper information about what our acharyas have said, where I'm not being cheated. So good association is very, very important.
Thank you. That's a good reminder on both fronts in terms of, well, maybe I took it the wrong way in the first place, saying, find any association that isn't like that, meaning there is, this kind of problem everywhere, but then there are pockets where we can find good association.
And also don't hear. You don't have to associate with anybody who's going to tell you that stuff. Oh, yeah. Hey, I just saw on the internet that so-and-so said. I'm not obliged to doom scroll on the internet. And I'm not obliged to associate with anyone who is doing that. I want to associate with those who are uplifting to me.
Yeah, I asked that question from the perspective of folks who are trying to find a balance of like not wanting folks to feel like they're being lied to or that anything is being hidden, but at the same time, not wanting to be discouraging, not wanting to have that be the first thing that you point people to or diving into it and opening up the can of worms. It's kind of it's a hard balance to find. And again, maybe it's an individual circumstance.
It's not that I miss out on anything by not knowing about something that's terrible. If it's supposed to come to me by Krishna's arrangement, by Guru's arrangement, so that I can do something to help, that's another thing. But I'm not hurt by not knowing about things.
Interesting.
Because I have to go back to Godhead. And what I'm thinking about at the time of death is also, and how many of my God brothers and God sisters have already died, like every year. And we've all died millions of times. And where are we now? How much bhakti do I have now? So what I want to do is focus on where I'm going, focus on the goal. Otherwise, I'll never get there. So I want to hear about the goal. I want to learn about all the details of the goal. I want the exact address. I want to know what turns that I have to make and what detours are there and what do I have to avoid. Srila Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj said that if you're in your car and then you're now turning out of the driveway, if you don't know where you're going, what's your end point, you can't even make your first turn. So it's always important to keep on the goal. And then we'll get there, otherwise we won't.
Wonderful. Thank you for that thought. Know the coordinates and no time to waste with distractions. I see that Scarlett has a hand raised. Scarlett, I will take you off of mute for a second. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hare Krishna, and thank you very, very much for today's class. I'm so sorry. Maybe my question is going to be strange, but I would like to still ask it. Would you believe if Prabhupada was now alive, would consider ISKCON exactly the way he wanted to?
That's the question.
Yes.
Since day one, he was always correcting his disciples. I remember the GBC, and maybe it was 75, I'm not exactly sure, that they made an injunction that all the women should leave the temples or something else. And then Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to go to China. And he said, GBC, resolution, dissolution, no solution. He was very upset at that particular time. So I'm not saying how he feels at the moment. I'm just saying throughout, from day one, he's always correcting and guiding and don't do this and do that. Even in 1976, me and the other artists, maybe I was the worst out of them, that my picture has to be on the cover and fighting over that. And so Prabhupada said that sometimes my disciples are just like monkeys, just fighting. And even at the very end, there is no end because Prabhupada is totally alive right now and he's present. He's present in the hearts of sincere followers. He's present in his books. He's present in every atom. And some days before he physically left or left the vision of the world, this is a Bengali conversation that was translated. But anybody who hears the Bengali tape, they can pick out the word bandara, which means monkey. And so he was telling or asking Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, please take care of my disciples. I've trained them as much as they allowed by their sukritis and sanskars. Please train them further. They're like monkeys. Monkeys means always fighting. So I don't want to take the liberty to say how Prabhupada would feel right now, except I will say that banning devotees who have been initiated by gurus who are not authorized by the GBC is not proper. Also, for a while, there was like you're not allowed to say Radharani's name or sing to her, except on Radhastami. So I can't imagine Prabhupada being happy with that. Being sectarian, if you're not initiated by an ISKCON guru, then you're a person non grata as far as getting any services allotted to you in a temple. These are things that are like 100% shastric, non-shastric.
May I ask another question?
Kristen?
I think if Ravi's okay with it, we can go maybe one more question and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. What would Prabhupada say about book changing? Would he be okay with it? Would he say, it's okay, change whatever I have sent, okay?
Well, that's another controversial topic. But there are different views on that. Like my godbrother Garuda, who's on one of the committees there, his take on that is that keep it as it is or make a change as an annotation. Like this was written in the original, but because such and such and such, we know that Prabhupada wanted to be changed to such and such, but taking the responsibility, taking our own responsibility that we have done that. There were certain things in because I was there right from the beginning when all of the transcribers were brand new people like Bhakti Neil, and I would paint in the same room that Prabhupada would make his Boga offerings in. And so Bhakti Neil used to type in the same room. And so when Prabhupada said, what was that? The planet of the Pitris, because of Prabhupada's accent and because Pitris is not a common word in his ancestors, but to Bhakti Neil it doesn't mean anything. So he changed it to the planet of the trees. And there were other things like that. Sometimes I know even in the transcribing of Syamarani Goswami Maharaj's lectures, he might say mantra, and then they'll transcribe it to be months, months. So sometimes things need to be changed, but not overboard. I hope that in a balanced way answers the question.
Thank you so much for that, Syamarani Prabhu. I really, really appreciate, I know we're all grateful for having your association today and feel so blessed to be able to hear these insights from you. We really do appreciate you participating in this conference, you sharing your thoughts with us and being available to us today. For all of those listening, I think we had a little issue with the video, but we'll make the Zoom recording available on Facebook and on YouTube if we can. And we just really, really want to thank you for being here.
Thank you, Christy. You're very kind. Your kind words. I just want to offer that I can send this to you, Christy, if you like, and if you want to look it over and maybe distribute it in some way. None of them.
I would love that. Yes, I would love that. Selfishly, just for myself, but also to share that perspective with others on those unique nuggets of wisdom that can only come from that kind of direct experience.
And so I have your email now, so I can just send it to you then.
Thank you so much. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much again. Everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Hare Krishna. We hope to see you again in other parts of this conference. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all your very inspiring association. Look forward to see you soon.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.